Welcome to the American Diversity Report podcast, where we interview creative change makers and inspirational innovators. I'm Deborah Levine, your host and the editor of the American Diversity Report. And with me today are three amazing creative souls who composed the memorable music for the Dirty Dancing movie. Okay, now the Dirty Dancing soundtrack spent 18 weeks as #1 on the Billboard 200 album sales chart and 230 weeks at the top 30, with an astonishing 55 million in sales worldwide. The Dirty Dancing original soundtrack is one of the greatest selling soundtracks of all times. This podcast features the composers of the movie's iconic songs: John DeNicola, Franke Previte, and Stacy Widelitz. You will be inspired by their work and careers. So let's start with John, who is an Academy and Golden Globe Award winner, singer-songwriter who co-wrote the two iconic songs, The Time of My Life and Hungry Eyes. And in the last few years, John has released 2 solo albums. He also discovered Maroon 5, a pop rock band whose lead vocalist is Adam Levine, no relation. Okay, Franke Previte is also an Academy and Golden Globe Award-winning singer-songwriter who also co-wrote those 2 iconic songs. Franke also had hits with Frankie and the Knockouts and co-wrote songs with Cyndi Lauper, Fleetwood Mac, and many others who are well known in the music industry. And Stacy Widelitz is a multi-platinum songwriter and photographer who co-wrote She's Like the Wind with his late friend Patrick Swayze, the star of Dirty Dancing. The award-winning song is played on US radio 4 million times.
Last week.
Last week. Okay, so Stacy has also scored features made for TV movies, written the end title song for Disney's Pocahontas 2, and was nominated for an Emmy for ABC's World of Discovery. Now, if you're not impressed yet, you're about to be, because we're going to ask each one of them to tell us a little bit about what inspired them to go into music and some of the highlights of their careers, so our next generation can be inspired too. So we're going to start alphabetically with John. Go for it, John. What you got?
Well, what inspired me, I honestly, since a very young age, 5, 6 years old, music just moved me. Just I don't know. There's a I don't know if this is for all musicians, but there's a kind of a longing for something, and music seems to quench it for me. And I can remember, I don't want to sound redundant to these guys, but they've heard this all before. But like the first time I heard "Pretty Woman" by Roy Orbison, what was I, 5, 6 years old, and there was something about all the elements, that great guitar lick, the mournful voice, the unrequited love until the end, right, where all of a sudden she's coming back to him. And so I my whole life I always gravitated towards music, and I would say, I played in bands from 7th grade on, cover bands or whatever. I had some friends and we started a band, and then I went to Berklee College of Music to sort of, this is after being in bar bands, I guess, cover bands, which at the time was part rock music. First it was like, before disco was disco, it was kind of soul. It was Barry White. It was the Stylistics. So we were doing stuff like that, with a 7-piece band. One of our horn players, actually, Rich Canada, went on to be in Billy Joel's band. Then I went to college. I went to Berklee College of Music to sort of further my musical knowledge. I was kind of into Frank Zappa and jazz fusion type music, and then I kind of came full circle and started writing for bands that I was in to try and get record deals. And I guess my first recording was on Motown, but it wasn't in the R&B. It was a jazz fusion band called Flight that Lee Young's brother Lester Young's brother Lee produced. And it was a band called Flight, and we did it was a jazz fusion record for Motown, and it was many years later. One of the songs was covered by Erykah Badu, who had sampled it for her song back in the day. And then I met with Franke, and he heard a track that I had written, and he was looking for songs for his band, Franke and the Knockouts, for a new record and a new record deal. And that kind of brought forth the ability, the chance to write I've Had This Time in My Life for Dirty Dancing. Franke got the call from his friend Jimmy Einer, and that threw me and Franke deeply into the songwriting realm.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Which I did, and for many years, and wrote with John Waite and Eddie Money and people like that. And as you said, we discovered Tommy Allen, a guy I was working with. We discovered Kara's Flowers, who went on to become Maroon 5. And then many years later, just recently, the last couple of years, I have my own record label, OMAD Records, OMAD Records. And I have, about 4 or 5 artists on that label. We're just putting out a record by Peter Lewis, who is Loretta Young's son, who is also a founding member of Moby Grape, which is a kind of a cult 60s band. And then I just did 2 records. After all these years in the business, I decided to do a record of me. And the first one was called The Why Because, and it was made up of songs that, a couple of the songs that Franke and I wrote, 4 of them actually, including Dirty Time of My Life and Hungry Eyes. And then the second record, which was called She Said, was kind of during the pandemic, and it was all new songs written with myself in mind, which was actually the most fun I've ever had in the music business, because I didn't have anybody to please or anything like that.
Thank
So
you.
I think that brings us up to date. I think as far as inspiration,
well, we'll come back to the inspiration.
Yeah, okay, that's all right.
I don't want that. Yeah, I really want to focus on that too. Yep. But for now, since you mentioned Franke, and he's here, how did you guys meet, Franke? He said you met.
Yeah, we met because I was in a band called Franke and the Knockouts, like we spoke about, and that band, Jimmy Einer, was the president of Millennium Records. And Jimmy decided that he was going to go into the film industry and work with film companies and record labels, as opposed to just having Millennium Records. So he closed up shop and left me kind of hanging out there to get another record deal. And so to stay alive and not having to play in the cover bands and things, I would sell cars out of my driveway and enough money.
You sold cars?
Yeah, out of my driveway, yes. Just to make enough money to pay, my electric bill or my water bill. And so I met this guy through a gal named Patty Maloney, I was dating at the time. And she goes, there's this guy, David Prater, who lives in Montclair, New Jersey. And I said, great. He has a studio. Maybe you can do your demos there for this next record. And I said, that sounds like a great thing. So while I was at David Prater's, he said, I have a guy that I'm working with that has a really cool track, and maybe you want to write some lyrics or melody or something track. And I said, sure, let me hear it. So he played the track, and I was inspired by that track. And I said, so how do I talk to this guy, John DeNicola? And he goes, well, I'll give you his number. So I called John, and he was like, give it a shot. Let's see what we got together. So our very first song we ever wrote together was called Hungry Eyes, which was in the movie Dirty Dancing, our very first attempt. So that was a hell of a first attempt. And, we went on to write probably a good, 10 or so more songs together, but none better than the track that Jimmy Einer called me out of the blue for. And after 2 years of selling cars out of my driveway and trying to get this new record deal, Jimmy Einer calls me and said, I have this little movie I need you to write a song for. And I said, Jimmy, I am way too busy. I'm trying to get another deal. And he's like, make time. This is going to change your life. I'm thinking, you already did that 2 years ago. You shut your label, and here I am selling cars. And he goes, no, I got a good feeling about this movie. And I said, so what's the name of the movie? And so when he said Dirty Dancing, my hand went to my forehead. And I thought, oh my God, Jimmy's doing porn. I thought he wanted me to write for a porn movie.
I can understand.
And he goes, no, this is a good little movie. Baby meets Johnny, and the father doesn't like the kid. And it's, And I said, all right, well, I'll give it a whirl. And he goes, so I've talked you into writing. He goes, this is the good news. The bad news is it's for the last scene, and it has to be 7 minutes long. And I'm thinking, that's never going to be a hit record. 7 minutes? I got to write MacArthur Park. So on the Garden State Parkway, first of all, I called John. First thought was to call John. And I said, here's the situation. Can you send me a track? So he only had a 4-track. So he went to his friend, Don Markowitz, who had an 8-track. And they came up with a track, which they sent me. And in that track, on the Garden State Parkway, exit 140, I put that cassette into my dashboard, and I started jamming. And I'm going, I'm of my life, I'm of my, what the hell am I saying? And I'm scribbling time of my life on an envelope. And the lyrics really from there were written by the man upstairs, because I had no idea really what this movie was about until I met Patrick Swayze at the Academy Awards. And he told me how much the song meant to the movie, because we were the 150th song that they had listened to. And, we weren't like hired to do this. We were like one of 150 people asked to write a song. And so the day of filming, which they filmed at a sequence, they were going to film to a Lionel Richie song, which Patrick told me, good song, but it wasn't our song. And we were like, not really digging the movie. We were like, let's get this over with and, move on. And then the director, Emilio Ortolino, was like, wait, we got one more cassette. The 150th cassette was I've Had the Time of My Life. They filmed to the song. And Patrick said, at the end of the day, we just looked at each other and went, oh my God, what just happened? Let's go make a movie. He goes, it turned the camaraderie totally around this one song. And so it's the power of music. So, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
That was the demo, though. It wasn't the final copy. They filmed to Franke and Rochelle Capelli singing the demo version,
which we sell for pancreatic cancer now.
I understand, and for good reason, yes.
Yes.
And we talk about Patrick Swayze and the good friend that he was, and also passing so early. And we're going to come to Stacy, who I believe knew Patrick before the rest of you met him. Is that Stacy?
We met in 1983 in his acting class. And I kept saying to him that he looked so familiar. And he was naming some movies and TV shows that he'd been in, and I hadn't seen any one of them, which annoyed him. And he was finally, I said, it's not that kind of familiar. It's like I've seen you around. Then this blonde woman came over and he says, this is my wife, Lisa. And he had introduced himself to me as Buddy, which was his nickname amongst friends and family. It was a childhood nickname. So I looked at them and I said, I got it. The two of you are always working on a black sports car on the weekends on La Jolla Avenue. And they said, yeah, and they said, yeah, how do you know that? And I said, I live right around the block from you. So we live 2 houses away from each other. And I was living with my then girlfriend, Wendy Fraser, who sings on She's Like the Wind. And so the 4 of us started hanging out and talking about theater and music and dance. I had some experience in music for dance. And so we discussed that and, you know, all sorts of things. And we just became friends. And then the next year, he was working on a movie called Grandview, USA, with Jamie Lee Curtis and C. Thomas Howell. And he called me and he said, you know, they're looking for songs for Grandview. I've had this idea for a song. I can't get anywhere with it. You want to work on it with me? So I said, yeah, sure. You know, I knew he had a musical background. He played some guitar and he'd been on Grease and on Broadway. And so he lived around the block. So he walked around with his guitar in hand and I was at the piano, and he had only 2 chords and a lot of lyrics. And the first 2 lines I really liked, which was, she's like the wind through my tree, she rides the night next to me. And then I didn't like the 3rd and 4th line. I told him so, and he's, well, what would you say? So I kind of just thought for a minute, and I thought, well, you've got nature and all that. She leads me through moonlight only to burn me with the sun. And so to which he said, what does that mean? And I said, I don't care, just write it down. So then when we knew we were onto something, when we realized that She's Like the Wind could be the title of the song and the hook and not just the opening line. We did a really good demo of it with him singing it and my girlfriend doing some backgrounds in this little interplay with him, and I brought in a guitarist. And then ultimately they didn't use it for Grandview. So they, the demo sat in a drawer for a couple of years. And then he called me all excited from North Carolina, where they were shooting Dirty Dancing, and said, oh, they want it for this movie. And I was, you know, sort of semi-pleased because I had heard about the movie and I'd heard that it was supposed to be very bad, and that it was going to be in the theaters for 1 week and then go straight to video, especially because the production company had never done a theatrical release before. They only did videos. So, you know, we recorded the final version of it with Michael Lloyd producing, who produced Time My Life also. And then even then, it was almost a year till the movie came out. And when the soundtrack was first released a few weeks before the movie, it died a very fast death. And then the movie came out, and all of a sudden the soundtrack shot up to #1. The movie was actually moving up the box office charts, which is highly unusual. And then we realized something has exploded here. And I'll never forget Michael Lloyd calling me. I guess this was probably October, and the movie was released late August. And he said, hey, you're getting a gold record for the soundtrack. I said, oh, that's great, which is 500,000 records. And so then like a week or a week and a half later, I called him and I said, Michael, when do I get the gold record? Because I didn't know how it worked. And he said, oh, you're not getting a gold record because now you're getting a platinum record, which meant that it had gone from 500,000 to 1 million in a very short period of time. And then when Patrick and I finally did receive our first platinum records, it was for 3 million. Mm-hmm. And Wendy received hers for her participation on the song a week later, and it was 4 million. So it was a phenomenon. It was just something that nobody expected, and nobody, and least of all Buddy Patrick. He was just blown away by it. And he did stuff like, he called me on New Year's Eve, that following New Year's, to say, I want to see how famous I've become. I want to see if I can get us into Spago tonight, which was the hottest restaurant. And I first tried under my name and couldn't get us in. Then he called and we were in. So it was the typical LA story, but
Yeah.
it was stuff like that where there was a magic for him. And, you know, he went to New York City to sign copies of the single of She's Like the Wind. And the police said that they hadn't seen anything like it. The Beatles were in New York. So it was really remarkable. It was head spinning.
Head spinning. So I have a question for all three of you. This was an unexpected, amazing response by the audience, by the public, to a movie that didn't have great expectations, and to your music. How did you feel? How did you adjust to suddenly being these incredible stars? What was that like?
Well, I don't know if the songwriter's ever the star.
Yeah.
You know, it's when, you know, to this day, I see She's Like the Wind by Patrick Swayze. It doesn't mention me, but that's fine. You know, it's his performance. But yeah, you know, there's, you know, the composers, the behind the scenes people, they're never really the stars.
Right.
But it certainly does change access that you get to people.
For me, you know, being that I was an artist for many years and had several albums and hit records as an artist, what writing Time of My Life and Hungry Eyes did for me was that now I wasn't the artist. Bill Medley and Jennifer Warren, the song was the artist. Hungry Eyes, Eric Carmen was the artist. And so at that particular point in my life, I de-egoed myself and said, I just became a songwriter. And, you know, it kind of changed me and my outlook. I had just adopted a little boy from the Ukraine. And so here I am, a new father with a young little boy, and thinking, you know what? The man upstairs has a direction for you, except that this career, you know, I was 40 years old now, still trying to be a rock star. I was way too old, you know, but in my mind, I'm 20 and I'm going to get that record deal. But accepting that, no, that's not going to happen, and have the alternative happen to me, which the song became bigger than me. And I became a songwriter.
And we're all very glad you did.
I would say it just kind of fulfilled my dreams, really, because as I stated earlier, I always wanted to do music. It was the only thing I wanted to do. And, you know, I had to do things, worked with my dad as a bricklayer and work in a restaurant as a bartender. But this fulfilled, you know, that dream that that little 5-year-old, 6-year-old had of being in the music business. I'm still, you see behind me is a recording studio. I'm putting out records. I'm making music. I'm writing my own stuff. I'm writing for other people. And I'm, you know, doing everything this many years later that I ever wanted to do. So it's really a dream. You know, we're, like Stacy said, we're not stars, writers, and it's the same in the film world. They're almost the bottom of the barrel, you know, as is indicated by what streaming services pay writers. Streaming services, which has taken over from, you know, obviously LPs and CDs and even downloads, pays the songwriter thousands of a penny. We are the low man. We get the smallest percentage between the record label, the Spotify's, the artist, and the publisher. We get this little tiny bit. It's almost worse in streaming than it is anywhere else, I think. Wouldn't you say, guys? I think
Yep.
streaming is the worst for.
Well, you know what keeps us alive, all three of us, with our music, is that sync licensing takes the place of record royalty, not record royalties, but airplay, the performance royalties. So if a commercial comes along and wants to use your song, now you have a license that you give them, and then there's that performance royalty from television. The low on the pole is the streaming, the Spotifys of the world, and how a song gets streamed. I feel sorry for a young artist or a young person trying to come up and live off of the money that you make from streaming, because it's almost an impossibility. So you have to become your own record label. You have to do your own video. You have to have 3 million hits on YouTube. And now maybe they're looking at you. So it's a whole different generation of how a star is built. And you almost have to build your own star.
And since we're looking for the silver lining here, I would say I agree with everything Frankie said, but you know, when you have the music or whatever it is, film, photography, whatever it is, when you have it in your blood, it's got to come out. You got to do it. And as unlikely as this story is, it could be an unlikely story for you too. You have to, you know, as I say, you have to be in it to win it. So you have to be putting music out there. You have to be, you know, dedicated to your craft and your art, and you have to let people hear it, however that happens. And you just may, who knows, it may just sneak its way in to some situation like Dirty Dancing.
But it's a lottery ticket, you know. But that's why me selling cars out of my driveway was my way of staying in the business without having to play every night in a cover band and come back all fatigued and not have the energy to write a song the next day. You know, so selling cars out of my driveway was put an ad in a newspaper, wait for somebody to call me. And in those other 8 hours during the day, I'm writing songs, taking voice lessons. And so I'm honing my craft that way.
You know, one thing I want to mention that is relevant to this is many years ago, I was taking classes in the mechanics of film scoring at UCLA shortly after I moved to LA, because my main business was not songwriting. My main business was writing music to picture, scoring work, which is a whole different mindset. And I always say it's much harder, and it is. So I was in one of the classes, and the teacher was a giant man named Don Ray, who was about 6'5" and 400 pounds. And there were about 20 of us in the class. And I was already a working composer. I'd written themes for daytime television shows in LA and all this. And he said something to the class one time when he came in. He said, you know, I look at all your smiling faces, and I feel obliged as your teacher to give you the reality check that maybe one or two of you out of this whole class will actually have a career in this business. And you could feel all the air go out of the room. And I got annoyed, and I raised my hand and I said, Don, I understand that you feel you're obliged to give us that perspective from your point of view. But don't you think that we're each obliged to believe that we are going to be the one out of the one or two? And he looked at me and he said, good point. And then what was very funny, because he knew the work I was doing. This is before Dirty Dancing. As I was walking out of the room, he grabbed me by the collar and pulled me over. And he was a foot taller than I was. And he looked down at me, he said, I wasn't talking to you. And which was a very nice thing for him to say.
Yeah.
But, you know, I always say to, when I do lectures or any type of mentorship and young composers or songwriters, whatever, I always tell them, is it really hard? Yeah. Is it really competitive? Yeah. Is it frustrating at times because you're banging your head against the wall? Yes. But I did it. And if I did it, that doesn't mean that you can't do it. And not only that, if you get to a certain point in the music business, it is the most fun that you can possibly have. It's just, because you're constantly thinking young. You're constantly viewing things in a fresh way. And how do I challenge myself? And how do I shape shift? Because every 5 to 7 years, you've got to kind of shift what you're doing. And it's you, and then you get to meet your boyhood heroes. You know, it's you know, to be able to sit in Quincy Jones' kitchen with him for an hour and just chat with him is an amazing privilege that would not have happened had I, you know, gone into a different career. So it's definitely fun.
Well, I think you can kind of envision in life, you know, you're like, when we were nominated for an Academy Award, I put in my mind that we were going to win. I saw myself winning this award and kept believing that that was going to happen. And I think that's part of success, is that vision and that belief in yourself to make something happen. And I think that's what a young person, you know, if I was to pass something along, even though there's these negatives and you get knocked down, it's how you get back up and take that punch and keep moving. And so it's the belief in the vision that you have in yourself. And I think that's what you also saw in yourself and your teachers saw in you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was incredibly stubborn about a career in music. So, because I chose that path at 13, and by 15, I was playing clubs on Long Island in a lounge band, and I had joined the Musicians Union at 15. So it was really early, you know, for me. I think of a 15-year-old now and say, wow, that 15-year-old's playing in an adult lounge where they serve alcohol and the waitresses are dressed in leotards. You know, it's like, no, that wouldn't be happening today. But, you know, I did.
Where in Long Island was this?
That first place was in Plainview, where I grew up,
Okay.
out in Nassau County. It was a place called it was a motel called the King's Grant Motor Inn, and it had a restaurant called the Port Royale Room, and that's where we played. It was piano, sax, bass, and drums, and I was on the piano.
I love it. I grew up on Long Island too, so that's
Oh.
I was just curious.
So did John. Deborah, so did John.
Yeah, we were talking about that before you guys joined us, that we have more in common than we realized. Now,
Well,
you're
I didn't know, John, that Richie Kanata was in your band, because the other guys in Billy Joel's band were from my town, Plainview, except for Liberty DeVito. He was from Seaford, and I used to play clubs with him on Long Island.
Cool.
It was all interconnected.
Yep.
yeah, small world.
Yeah.
World. So if you had one thing that you could share for the upcoming generation that that you did, that you would advise them not to do, what would it be?
Not to do.
Not to do.
I would say, don't lay back. Put yourself forward. Try and be confident, even if you're not. Try and appear confident.
Yes.
I think I not that I suffered, but I think I could have gotten further if I you know, I have a kind of a laid back tendency, and I don't like to toot my own horn very easily. And I would, you know, those are things you can't really control, but if that would be my advice, you know, just go for it. Be kind of more be aggressive as you can, you know, without being abrasive. Just, you know, be try and move forward confidently.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to remember that too.
I would say, if you're lucky enough to have a great success, like say something that the three of us experienced, I have a regret that I didn't enjoy it enough in the moment.
That's a good-
Because you're immediately thinking ahead to how do I build upon this?
Yeah.
Instead of thinking, oh my God, I have a #3 song on pop radio.
Yeah, I think that's true, Stacy.
Yeah, and to take a step back and just take it all in. It's like I enjoy that success more now than I did back then. Because now also it has the advantage of being evergreen, so it's still on the radio for 35 years. But back at the moment, it was a very strange thing to walk into every mall and my song is playing someplace. And I think my parents enjoyed it more because they would come out to visit me in California. And one time we were in a shopping mall and my song came on the loudspeakers and my father was like, he wrote that song. So it becomes a thing. So, but yeah, I would say really, really take it in what is happening for you in the moment.
Thank you.
My son Jake did something like that too when he was he must have been 8 or 10 years old, and Ringo Starr's All Stars were playing in the Beacon Theater, and we had tickets and we got tickets and we were in the audience, and my 10-year-old son was like, when they did Hungry Eyes, because Eric Carmen was with Ringo at that moment and on that tour, and so they did Hungry Eyes, and my son was like, Dad, tell them you wrote this song. Tell everybody you wrote this song.
Family.
Yeah.
Frankie, what about you?
These guys have such great points. I don't know if I can live up to what they just said. I think that there are moments in your life that you take it or hear advice, negative and positive. And from those negative and positive moments or advice, and it could be from total strangers, or it could be from an A&R guy who never wrote a song before in his life. I think that those moments are all career building moments that you can take a speck of something from that advice, positive or negative, and collect it and have it be part and parcel of your next step. Because it's a process. It all is a process that unless you take this step, you're stuck in a rut or you start to move back. So keep moving forward, accepting good criticism and bad criticism, and learn from each. That's it.
Thank you. Now, I'm a writer. I published 15 books. And what I tell people is to take that advice and you write it down. And you keep a log of everything like that. So you look at it again and again, because you're right.
Yeah, I agree. As a lyricist, I would say don't stop tweaking.
Yes. Oh, gentlemen, this is wonderful. All of you. I'm in awe of your careers, your creativity, right? And your humanity. It's just been a joy. Have you anything else you'd like to add before we start to wrap this up?
Well, I'd like to say something quickly because I have an editing session I have to get to. But John and I, along with Donnie, after Patrick Swayze, our friend buddy, his passing, I put a cold call into the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network and finding out that that's where Lisa Swayze was spending her time and energy. And so with that cold call, the person that answered the phone, Pamela Costa, who was the founder of the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, answered the phone. I told her who I was and that the original demos that Baby and Johnny actually danced to, Time of My Life, Hungry Eyes, we would like to sell and donate every penny to pancreatic cancer. So we've been doing that for 30 years and we're, hovering close to $30,000. And so if people want to go to on Facebook, Dirty Dancing Demos, you can own a piece of history and you can also help in the cause of helping us to heal others. And April 29th is my birthday. And on that birthday, I am with the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network in New York doing the Purple Stride, a walk for pancreatic cancer, with Lisa Swayze. So if you're in New York, come and see us. You know, go to my Facebook page, Franke Previte, and you'll see a little poster there, tap on my face, and you can donate directly to the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network. If we all gave $1, everyone in the world, we could beat this disease.
Oh, thank you so much, Frankie.
You're welcome.
Wow.
It was nice talking to you. I have to go, and
I understand.
Stacy, always a pleasure, man. I love you guys.
Great to see you. I
Okay.
hope we'll see you soon.
Absolutely. Be well. Have a great
Just switch this camera. There we go. Nope.
Still going.
Yeah. I'm trying to-
Let's hope he has pants on.
Yeah, right.
Oh, dear.
One thing I wanted to bring up is, you know, because you mentioned earlier, and it actually relates in certain ways to what we've been talking about, and that is the path that I've been taking in black and white street photography that started quite by chance in 2015 and has gotten to a point where I've had 3 shows. I've sold, I think, 12 pieces. I've been published. I've won 5 awards. And I think the lesson there, for if we're keeping it on theme, is that creativity is a never-ending process. And even if it's a field that you didn't think was your field, and then unexpectedly it just jumps up out of nowhere because of some hidden talent or whatever. That's part of that shape shifting that I love about being in a creative field. It's like, oh, okay, I'm going to go to Paris and wander the streets for 2 weeks taking pictures of people, which I just did. I just got back last week. So it's another pursuit. It's another form of creative expression that I love, and just shows that there's no age limit on creativity either.
Amen.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, for my record label, OMAD, OMAD records.com, and you can see, like 10 artists that we put out, and just put a slew of them this year. So, as I said earlier, the Peter Lewis, Loretta's son, and I also put her granddaughter's record out, Arwen Lewis. We just put out that, so we're very busy at the moment.
Yes, I can imagine. I love it. Oh, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, you can go to Widelitz.com.
Okay.
All one word.com. And then also on Instagram. I don't post pictures of food on Instagram. I use it only for my photography. So that's at Stacy Widelitz on Instagram. So people check it out. So.
All right. Well, audience, you have had the pleasure and honor of hearing from these creative souls. I hope that you will stay in touch and add your comments to the page on the American Diversity Report that's going to be called the Dirty Dancing Composers Podcast, right? Writers of iconic music. So that will be it, and it'll be out soon, maybe a week or so. And I thank you for joining us, being here to share this with our audience. Audience, I thank you. We'll close this down for now. If you two will just stay on after we stop recording just for a moment to debrief, that would be great.